Welcome back to Blunt Business. I'm your host, Sean Eubanks, and we have Jay Kotzker on the show. Welcome back, Jay.
Thanks, appreciate it. Happy New Year, Sean.
Happy New Year to you. Thanks so much for coming on, man. We have you on at least one segment for the podcast per week, and it's just been illuminating. So, a lot of stuff going on in California. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's definitely start in California. Obviously, January 1st, recreational sales began out there, which is very exciting for the entire industry. We're keeping an eye on things because it's a little bit of a patchwork system out there right now. Obviously, you need to get your local jurisdiction approval and license before you can get your license on the state level. So we're looking at that very closely, watching all of the hoopla and the hype that we experienced here in Colorado a number of years ago, and sharing in the celebration with them.
And when you're writing these licenses, what is the charge if someone's calling and saying, okay, I need to get my local license first, and then I need to get the state license later? What are the fees for that?
The fees are pretty straightforward. We're doing local licenses for $25,000 here at STRAINWISE, and the state license are also $25,000. Both of those are required to be up and operational, and as our listeners probably know and have heard through your number of podcasts and webinars, we're very proficient in that. We've got a number of clients currently in California and many around the country that we've done very similar work for with high success rates.
And worth noting that fee is the lowest in the country.
Absolutely. We've actually been priced very, very strategically because we know that there's a very high barrier to entry for a lot of people, and part of our thinking here is there are people that don't have these vast sums of money that are very qualified, very passionate, that want to get in the industry, and we're here to help them, as well as the bigger players, the more corporate players that want to do the same thing.
Okay, and is there anything you're seeing in the California program? It was almost on autopilot. I feel like they'd already written these press releases already, because it felt like on New Year's Day, it's going gangbusters, it's the best program ever. But we know there are glitches. Anything that you see that you're kind of concerned about?
The only thing that I think of note right now for sure is that the statewide seed to sale tracking, what they call track and trace system, which is the metric system, which is what we use here in Colorado, is not up and running statewide just yet. So they're operating in a little bit of a fuzzy area where they're relying on licensed operators, at least those operators that have their temporary licenses, to track the sales, to keep invoices, to have paper manifests and everything that they need to do to complete their books and records requirements to track the sale of the product through the public.
Well, now, is everything going to distribution centers already, or are they in the process of opening those?
They're in the process of opening those. It's become very difficult, I think, for a lot of the retailers because they've been used to sourcing their supply of products, whether it's flour or concentrates, edibles, what have you, from anybody that they wanted to. And Now they can only source those through licensed or at least temporary licensed operators. So while I didn't hear many reports of shortages or anything in the stores up to this point, I think what you'll see is as these retailers need to source products from licensed, legitimate operators, that they might have a little bit of trouble sourcing the quantities or the different varieties that they've been looking for.
Yeah, and I think there's two conversations it seems like that's going on in California right now. One is, we're legal on January 1st, but I really don't have to do much until July, and that's just not true. It's
certainly not. Obviously, there were strict emergency regulations that came out, very voluminous. We've spent hours and hours poring over those and have come to be very familiar with them. And those are requirements that they're obligated to keep now. Now, some operators have until June to get fully licensed, but that doesn't mean that they don't have to abide by those regulations now.
Okay, so STRAINWISE is expanding top to bottom in the state of California. Can you make an announcement on any of that stuff yet, or is it still top secret?
Yeah, it's all still very top secret. Something is coming soon, though, I can assure you of that.
Okay, I'm trying to get it out of you another way. Is there anything that you're not involved with in California? So there's a bunch of different licenses. You got delivery, micro business, processing, cultivation, retail. Is the vision to basically kind of service all those markets, or is there something that you're avoiding?
Well, the only thing we're avoiding right now is testing. It doesn't mean that we can't write a testing application for a client, but we're not super engaged in that aspect of the industry, even though it's very important.
Yep.
We just don't have the the laboratory experience, the technical know-how to really immerse ourselves in that license category.
Well, and there's some great players in that market already doing that, which complements the industry. What is your, and this is you kind of crystal balling it, what is, in Colorado, we test, the consumer wants to know what the yield is, what the potency is. Do you see California in the testing front more focused on pesticides or heavy metals or the cleanliness of cannabis, or do you think they're going to be eventually a potency buyer also?
I think the potency is very important, not only in the THC content of the product, but also in the other cannabinoids that are in there, your CBDs, your CBGs, CBNs. Consumers want to know what it is that they're purchasing, just like any other retail product. And so they're gonna, while they're gonna be focused on potency, because a lot of people, especially on the recreational side, are probably going to look for what's the most potent product out there, what's gonna give me the biggest euphoric high. But there's other consumers certainly that are gonna be looking for other potency profiles, in other cannabinoids. I think with California being, very focused on healthy living, on organic lifestyle, all of that, I think what you'll see is a high demand for clearly labeled products that talk about the testing processes, whether there's any pesticides or residues in concentrates or edible products. So you're going to see a very heavy push for that, as we've seen here in Colorado.
Okay, and finally, if you have a message for a cultivator out there, there are some numbers of 15,000 cultivators in the triangle, right? Mendocino County and others. Not all 15,000. In fact, a fraction of those are planning to go legal. How big of a mistake is that, Jason?
I think it's huge. It's really big. I mean, we certainly didn't have the long-standing kind of gray market here in Colorado that they've had over the last 20 years in California. And I think that gives the California operators a little bit of false sense of security, just because of the way that the program has really been run for the last 20 years. But I assure you that in order to keep the federal government from poking its head into the state of California, California regulators are going to be very, very strict as far as regulating, ensuring compliance, and coming down on those illegal operators.
Yeah, and if I could wave a magic wand, it would be, to put on a little bit more of a pure capitalist stance and say, look, let's keep taxes low to get all of those growers into the system, and then show them that we're going to raise it incrementally. Thank you. But doesn't that seem like, if you're a grower, you're like, gosh, I'm not going to pay that. I'm not going to pay that up front. I'm not going to pay this. It seems onerous from the beginning. I mean, California tends to do things their own way, but wouldn't it be so much easier if they just lowered it to get everybody in?
I think it would, for sure. But at the same time, what the state and the local governments are requiring, as far as corporate documents, standard operating procedures, security protocols, there are a number of things that a lot of maybe gray market operators have never really had to put together before, right? Their standing operator procedure was in their head. It was what they woke up and did every single day, and it wasn't something that they had to prove out to a governmental agency. So I think that might be a barrier of entry as well, and I don't see, obviously, regulators relaxing that requirement.
I know we're talking about California a lot. It's the biggest market out there, and I know we got other things to cover, but wouldn't it make sense for these cultivators, you know your craft, you're one of the best in the world, there's no doubt about it, but you've got all this out-of-state competition moving in there. Wouldn't it make sense for those cultivators to partner with a consultant or someone that at least knows the market to get them up to speed, to get ready for what is going to be intense competition?
I think it is. Absolutely. It would be to their advantage. And I think a consulting company like STRAINWISE or others have the technical know-how and have the writers in-house that can memorialize and capture those standard operating procedures, some of those company policies and procedures and best practices, and help those people through the application process. Maybe we don't do the entire thing for them, but we can do those big, heavy lifting pieces to help them along their way.
Yeah, I just hate to see those guys, doing the best they can and thinking they're going to be successful, and you've got, Green Solution and Native Roots and a couple others that are just kind of eating their lunch.
That's right, and and there's no doubt that they've got tried and true practices out there. I mean, obviously that's the mecca of cannabis in the state, or in the country rather.
Yeah.
And we would hate to see those operators and those kind of long-standing cultivation principles kind of go by the wayside in favor of big corporate giants.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, we are advocates of the legacy growers. We respect where the industry's come, but we also, out of necessity, STRAINWISE Consulting and others, you have to move along. You have to get over that hump. And I totally understand they got to do things their way for a long, long time. But man, if I could extend an olive branch, it's reach out to a consultant that you trust and try to get some great information and make sure that you can still keep doing what you love to do.
Absolutely, you couldn't have said it better.
Okay, so I know, can we go on to Colorado now?
Before we get to Colorado, some big news out of out of Los Angeles, which obviously is going to be a huge player in the California market. Just today, the Department of Cannabis Regulation, which is heading the regulatory program in the city of Los Angeles, released its application, at least its application for priority applicants, the Prop D applicants, the long-standing dispensary and collective operators in the city, that they can start applying for their temporary licenses now, which is a huge step. Just on the 31st, the department kind of released their rules, and it was kind of slow to roll this program out, especially given the January 1 recreational opening. But they have kind of jumped on the bandwagon. They've opened up their application process, and those pre-ICO Prop D operators only have 60 days to get their temporary license. So if you haven't secured a temporary license application yet, go to the website and download it. If you need help understanding what it says or what the submission requirements are, which are pretty hefty, then reach out to a consultant, and no one's better than us.
Is there a part, you've got several clients in Los Angeles area, massive market. Is there a particular area that you're not in that you'd like to be in?
Not right now. I think the city of Los Angeles and LA County specifically is going to be a hotbed, and we've got clients all over that right now, and we look forward to seeing what else opens there.
And so anyone that wants to open up a STRAINWISE store or something like that is going to have other STRAINWISE stores, other entities, a lot of support built in there, not only brand recognition, which in itself is incredible, which people are going to be reaching for if they haven't already figured that out already, but also just the idea that you've got partners. So if I just want to have a cultivation license or just a dispensary, and I reach out to STRAINWISE, I know, okay, well, they've got other partners that are cultivating, processing, retail, so I've got a ready-made system already to sell my products.
Absolutely, there would be a huge support system built in there, not only for technical know-how, operational support, management support, but also making connections with other vendors, with other suppliers, ensuring that once you grow the product, you have good quality outlets to sell the product through. In addition, it never hurts to have to be under the umbrella of a marketing strategy that includes a lot of different stores and a lot of different geographic locations.
No, that's a great point. And because inside Los Angeles County is probably 50 different micro markets, and you only go several blocks and you've got an entirely different demographic. And what people are finding out is their Apple Store concept that works for this demographic fails over here, and they're not able to, sometimes I think they're in love with their concept instead of paying attention to what does the market want and what do they respond to and what other products. A real scientific approach using data and understanding, and using a company like STRAINWISE that's been in multiple markets from Puerto Rico all the way across the country. Those are all different markets, and you can draw on that experience.
Absolutely, and I think it's short-sighted and foolish to think that one marketing strategy is going to fit all sizes and all demographics. What we've seen with our clients here in Colorado and elsewhere is that every store needs a specific marketing strategy. The demographics of that neighborhood need to be evaluated, need to be understood, and sales and product selection and marketing strategies need to be tailored for those.
Great. Okay, a lot of stuff on California?
Yeah, we're done with California
All
for
right.
the day. We'll keep an eye on things. We'll
Yes.
check back in and see how their rollout is going next time we meet.
Well, having you on the show has been incredibly successful. A lot of people calling and thanking, and a lot of compliments. So I appreciate you being on here. I love this live news update that we're doing, so I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
Colorado.
A couple new things. Obviously, with January 1, there's new rules that rolled out. Some exciting things there. We got some clarification on how royalties are paid out, which is very important because for the longest time it was tough to license intellectual property, branding, know-how, trademarks, patents, things like that into the Colorado market without those outsiders being considered owners, which was prohibited until a short time ago. So we've got some clarification on that, which I think is really going to open the doors for a lot more innovation, a lot more cross-state intellectual property sharing, which is exciting. We've also created a brand new license category here in Colorado, our marijuana research and development license.
Okay.
Which is great. It's a license that's really outside the commercial realm, and it's really focused on either private or public institutions that want to research and develop, clinical trials for the product, which is great.
And it's an ancillary business. You don't have to register as a marijuana company.
Well, you still have to go through the same background checks and the same licensing process with the Department of Revenue, Marijuana Enforcement Division, state regulatory bodies, but it's just a non-commercial license.
Just maybe if you call it, something non-cannabis R&D, maybe you can keep your bank account.
Maybe.
Fingers crossed.
No guarantees.
Fingers crossed on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, another thing, and we touched on it a little bit ago with the potency testing in California. There's some revised and clarified potency rules here in Colorado about especially how those potency tests are taken, how the samples are taken, when the frequency needs to be done. In the past, it was, you had to go through a number of potency validations for a specific strain within a certain number of weeks, and then thereafter it was, one test every 6 months. What we found here in Colorado was that we got a really good baseline initially, and then after that, you really kind of lost track of the strain's potency, only testing it, twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
So they're revising that and they're moving it back. So once every quarter, then every strain, once it's validated, has to be retested. And it's just a good way to keep continuity in the potency results and to ensure that the customers understand what's in the product that they're getting.
So just cut in half from 6 months to 3 months, not too expensive for the businesses, right?
I mean, it's certainly going to add a cost. I mean, you think about a large-scale cannabis cultivator probably produces in the range of 40 to 50 strains. Mm-hmm. Doubling the amount of tests that they're going to have to do certainly adds an increase to their bottom line. But it's healthy for the customer. It's a way to say, hey, look, we're committed to providing the most accurate and up-to-date results that we can provide to customers and to consumers. And I think it's a good way for the state to step in and say, we just want to make sure that, all the way through the supply, everyone understands what the product is, what it tests at, and, how it's being, disseminated out into the public.
Well, and that's a great point about the customer too, because it is an expense for the business, but it's it seemed like there was a loophole there to game the system, where all the emphasis was focused on getting a certain test potency and then riding that marketing wave until you had to test it again.
That's right. I mean, and there's with different strain types, there's certainly a fluctuation in the potency. So if you set your baseline after your first 4 or 5 tests, and then you don't test the strain again for 6 months, you're talking about a number of iterations of that strain, and the potency could change. So it's just clarifying information that customers get.
Excellent.
Yeah. One final thing that is kind of along those same lines, there's some new packaging and labeling requirements. I think what state regulators want to see is that some of the white noise on the packaging and the labeling is cleaned up a little bit.
Okay.
That the warning statements, the potency statements, how they are, how big they are, how they're highlighted, where they are on the product packaging is made a little bit more clear so that the customer has an ease of recognition.
Okay, and give me an idea when changes like this are happening. I mean, Colorado does a lot right. They really do. Is this a slow rollout, or are they giving deadlines, or all of a sudden they're saying, hey, here are the new labeling? Because labeling can be expensive when you're changing, a batch of 50,000 or whatever. Have they done a good job of rolling that out, in your opinion?
I think they have. I mean, and what we've seen over the last couple of years is typically around, August or September, redline versions of what the upcoming rules will start rolling out to stakeholders, people working in the industry. There's a very robust public comment, public participation, industry participation part that goes along with it, and they get some feedback and they make tweaks along the way, and then the final rules roll out towards the end of November, beginning of December, and usually most of them have an implementation date of January 1st. A lot of times, if it's something that's going to require a little bit of lead time, especially something like this where you're talking about packaging and labeling that is ordered in large quantities, they're going to give you a little bit of lead time. For example, the packaging and labeling requirements that just came into effect are not mandatory until June of 2018. So it gives operators a little bit of time to start making those tweaks, start working through the supply of packages and labels that they have now, and then work towards the new compliance standards in June.
Excellent.
Yeah. Another thing out of Colorado, we received from the Department of Revenue a kind of a 2017 industry report. It was just very interesting. A couple of highlights from that. Occupational licenses at the mid-year hit 34,000 in the state of Colorado. Occupational licenses are required for anyone that either owns a licensed entity or works in one. And it's just a kind of a testament to the number of jobs that the industry is creating. And these aren't even ancillary jobs such as HVAC, electricians, attorneys, CPAs, things like that. These are people that are actually touching the plant. So 34,000, that's pretty good, and it's gaining about 640, 650 new occupational licenses every month.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and another thing is, I just found it interesting looking at the number of jurisdictions in the state of Colorado that have some sort of program. If you recall, the state of Colorado, very similar to other places around the country, requires there's a state that rule that says, hey, it's allowed. It's a constitutional amendment. But it allows local jurisdictions the ability to opt out of programs, whether it's on the medical side, on the recreational side, or both. 65% of local jurisdictions in the state of Colorado still have complete bans on medical and retail cannabis.
Yeah, and some of the best counties. It's interesting. It's probably a longer conversation for later, but there's a lot of county, obviously heavy consumption going on, but they just don't want it in their neighborhood.
Sure.
I think of Douglas County as one example. They'll go to Aurora, and they'll go, but it's just across the way. Do you see any of these jurisdictions changing their mind? I mean, are they? Oh, let me ask you this: are they allowed to accept funding even though they don't have the program in their jurisdiction?
No, if you don't have a program, you're precluded from accepting funding that comes from the tax revenue generated.
Is that pressure, right? A lot of money goes to schools. There are schools that are failing in certain areas. I don't know the correlation between not taking marijuana money and your school failing, but that's a very real. They could have used several $1 million. Do you see that changing? Do you see pressure from citizens going, listen, we need that revenue?
I think you do, especially the biggest example of that recently has been Colorado Springs. It's had a medical-only program since recreational was passed into law. And I think what they're seeing now is all of the residents of Colorado Springs, which is a big city in the state, are leaving Colorado Springs to make recreational purchases in neighboring cities.
Yeah.
So I think they're really feeling the hurt that comes along with not having the recreational program, and I think they're going to take a closer look at whether or not to open up to that.
Great point, because it's in their community. And if you go to Manitou Springs, or when you go, there are places around Colorado Springs that are booming and a great thing. So I don't think much of a change. If they just start accepting it, you'll have dispensaries, you'll have cultivation down there, but nothing's going to change. I mean, as far as an eyesore, any concerns in the community, I mean, they have it in their community now. It's all around them.
That's right. They have medical dispensaries as it is, and for the most part, I would imagine what you'd see is those medical dispensaries would become dual locations. They would get a recreational license, and it would be in the same shop. So you're not going to see an influx of a large number of new dispensaries coming in. And if they were truly concerned about that, they could find ways around that with zoning ordinances and putting caps on the number of recreational licenses out there.
Excellent. Hopefully they'll get that development and get the funding that they need.
Yeah. Last thing, a little bit of celebrity news out there. Just saw today that Iron Mike Tyson is going to open a 40 acres of what he's going to call Tyson Ranch in California City. It's a tiny little city just outside of Death Valley, about 15,000 residents. He's looking to do about 20 acres of cultivation, have an extraction lab, he has plans for a master grower school, and in addition to that, a little bit funny is that he's going to have luxury camping and some music venue sites there as well. So it'll be interesting to see what actually results there, but the city is really embracing Iron Mike and all that he's going to be bringing to the community.
Well, and they don't call it Death Valley for no reason. It's incredibly hot down there. One of the hottest places in the country.
It is, and and it's interesting that he's choosing to open up there. Obviously, the real estate's probably pretty inexpensive,
Affordable.
but
Yeah,
the water rights and the ability to use water on 20 acres for cultivation is going to be a huge challenge. I'm interested to see how that plays out.
me too. I wonder if he got it just for the land or how much he's involved in the canna tourism. He seems to be touching on all those things, and he's appealing to the social aspect. He probably sees a lot of the concerts and the cultural things that attract people. But it seems like a pretty big project for Iron Mike. Hopefully he's got some good people behind him.
Yeah, and if not, maybe he can reach out to us and we can launch our STRAINWISE University campus on his property.
Absolutely. We would love to do that. So Iron Mike, if you're listening, I'm a big fan of yours. And I mean, it would be cool to have him as a client, but also a little bit nervous, right? You want to make sure you win?
I don't know. I took him down in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, so
Did you?
What's the difference between a Nintendo and real life?
That's true, but it took like 4 years to beat him, right?
That's right. Glass Joe got me
Little
early.
Mac, Little Mac was going to work. It took I broke many controllers trying to beat him. He was tough.
He's
He was
tough.
tough. It was Sandman before him and Super Macho Man.
Oh yeah.
No,
it was
right
tough.
before them, and then Tyson. He was daunting. So, well, congratulations, Iron Mike, and we wish you all the best. And absolutely, like Jay just said, if you're interested, reach out to us. We'd love to work with you.
All right.
Well, that's it for the day.
That's all I got for this week.
Hey, thanks so much for jumping on the show here. We appreciate it. Always a pleasure having you, and always just an enlightening conversation.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And I want to thank you all for joining us on this episode of Blunt Business. You can download episodes of our program by going to cannabisradio.com, bluntbusinessradio.com, or subscribing to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and now iHeartRadio. Have an outstanding rest of your week, everyone. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.